It's hard to believe, but Batman Arkham Asylum released back in 2009. That's 10 years ago. Dear God, I just turned 30, and this fact hit me like a truck. I remember booting this game up for the first time on my Xbox 360 and being floored by the game's graphics. An original dark Batman game that took mature themes from the comics? I honestly couldn't believe it. For the record, my only exposure to Batman games came in terrible games such as Batman Forever for the SNES, and after being burned by so many superhero games, I almost gave up hope for a good superhero game until Arkham Asylum arrived. I've decided to replay this acclaimed series after rumors surfaced that a new game in the series will be revealed at this year's Game Awards, and I wanted to see if the series is still as good as I remember. So join me on this 3-part series as I explore the Batman Arkham series starting with Arkham Asylum. And yes, I know there's a 4th game, Batman Arkham Origins, but I'm going to stick to the core trilogy developed by Rocksteady. And always, subscribe, like, and this video is not intended for anyone below the age of 13, because I need to keep myself safe. The narrative opens up to this outstanding moment of misdirection. Batman just captured the Joker and is taking him to Arkham Asylum. Heavily strapped to a chair, you and several guards escort the clown to his holding cell, but things just aren't right. Batman's keen senses and profound knowledge of the Joker kicks in. These worries are confirmed when Joker escapes custody and takes over the prison within seconds with the help of his accomplice Harley Quinn and several other inmates. Batman must now stop the Joker and retake Arkham, but things are far worse than anticipated. You quickly find out that the Joker has been funding a deadly experiment attempting to replicate Bane's venom and power up his henchmen. Called Titan, this toxin turns anyone infected into hulking beasts, and superhuman levels of strength and speed are granted to anyone who ingests the toxin, but at the cost of one's sanity. What's worse is that Arkham's lead researcher was testing the substances on prisoners and played into Joker's hand when the researcher, Dr. Young, realized Joker was the one footing the bill under the alias Mr. White. The story was excellent, something straight out of a Batman graphic novel. Despite being rated T, the game used a lot of violence, including violent deaths, gruesome mutations, and disturbing psychological battles, with Batman having to contend with notorious villains such as Killer Croc, Scarecrow, and Poison Ivy, and everything led back to the core narrative of trying to prevent the Titan from reaching Gotham. Taken as a whole, Arkham Asylum's story was terrific, taking elements from the Batman's universe and condensing them into a constantly shifting adventure. That being said, the story did have some weaker elements. The Riddler's challenges, which I was once excited for, was actually the weakest part when I replayed the entire game. It's clear that Edward played a minor role within the game and only served as to extend the longevity of Arkham Asylum. For purposes to the Titan formula and spreading it through Gotham, he didn't really serve any purpose, at least from what I can tell, to the overall narrative, only serving as an Easter egg navigator since many of his riddles involve scanning items connected to Batman's extensive lore such as Harvey Dent and Firefly. Solving these riddles did provide extensive looks at the lore of each of the villains and heroes within Batman's world, and even cool interviews with the Arkham patients. But at the core of these side missions, they're basically just collectibles. Granted, Rocksteady did need a reason for Batman to go around scanning items and, getting these optional items like the interview tapes, but if you were to take the Riddler out of the entire game, it wouldn't have been any major loss. Especially seeing that the only real connection Edward has to Joker is at the final interview he has with a psychiatrist where he says, "I know what Joker's about to do, he's gonna set me free, yada yada yada," and then he's like, okay, why does he even set him free? I mean, he just becomes a minor inconvenience to Batman, he doesn't even do anything major. But even after a decade, the narrative still holds up. Riddler may have not aged as well as I thought, but the core story involving Joker's desire to have an army of superpowered henchmen still works, with the clown taking extreme measures to make this a reality while toying with Batman every chance he gets. The supporting villains offer a variety to the game, but they also push the story forward and elaborate on how the Titan formula came into being, but also provide setups for some incredible boss encounters. The gameplay for Batman Arkham Asylum was groundbreaking to say the least. The combat system has been translated into many other games following its use, with Batman having to switch between various targets, building his combo meter to execute specialized attacks, and switching techniques when facing an enemy using a specific weapon like knives or a stun baton. Rewards were provided in the way of experience for your highest combo achieved and used in a bare bones leveling system, upgrading health, more combat options, gadget effectiveness, and some stealth advantages. The combat was fantastic and constantly made me think 2 moves ahead, planning when enemies were at all times, planning out who to attack next, if I should execute a takedown or a throw, countering when needed, and the distance between enemies since Batman's dash had a specific range. This also led to some frustration, the first being the actual first punch. For some reason, Batman doesn't gain any momentum when connecting with the first punch, and especially on hard mode, this can be very annoying. You need that jolt of speed to avoid damage and keep your meter going, and since Batman can't cancel out of attacks, you need to leave yourself vulnerable when something decides to charge you because you don't have that extra speed. Most enemies can be taken down with ease. Titans serve as mini-bosses that can be taken down pretty easily, using the same tactic that you use against Bane for some reason. Just wait for them to charge, throw your Batarang, then counterattack to kill the Titan or, incapacitate him because Batman doesn't kill. To combat the weak enemy variety, Rocksteady allowed them to use different weapons such as guns, knives, stun batons, and pipes. This forces you to take these variables into consideration when choosing which enemy to take down, especially during the challenge rooms, where you are not only tested for your combo chain but also style as well. Overall, the combat system remains as amazing as ever, and there's a reason other developers have incorporated it into their games as well. Stealth was also a major element. During Predator levels, Batman would have to remain unseen and take out enemies while being seen. You are given a lot of ways to take out the enemies, such as explosive gel, inverted takedowns, and the classic suffocation, with enemies responding to their fallen allies being taken out. By looking more frequently at possible locations Batman could be hiding, covering each other, or becoming scared and start to check their blind spot more frequently. To keep these situations tense, enemies are armed with guns that can easily kill Batman, especially on hard mode. You are given more room for error on any other mode except for hard, but seeing that death is almost instant when seen, you are encouraged to remain in the shadows. The enemies aren't too smart though. Despite them walking in unique paths after seeing one of their allies down, their line of sight is pretty poor. Understandably, this was done so you wouldn't pull out your hair during these challenges. Imagine if these enemies here had the AI of Metal Gear Solid 5. Predator challenges would be impossibly hard. The challenge rooms do offer difficult trials where you have to execute enemies using specific takedowns, and the enemy AI does react very easily to certain takedowns, so you can actually manipulate them effectively if you know how to use them. The Predator sections are not as exciting as the combat situations, but they do break up the gameplay effectively to give you a taste of both Batman's combat and stealth tactics. Outside of Predator and combat challenges, you'll explore Arkham Island. The island is littered with Riddler challenges, ranging from collecting trophies and solving riddles. When I first played Arkham Asylum, I thought these were awesome optional objectives, but not anymore. Maybe it was the HD remake that made seeing the destroyed walls or my prior knowledge of the game, but I was able to solve about 99% of the riddles with ease. Finding the trophies just meant using a specific type of gadget or finding an exposed vent. And the riddles required me just to scan items that are linked to specific Easter eggs. Granted, the characters' bios were excellent to read once you unlocked them, but overall the Riddler's side missions were more taxing than I remembered, since there was no fast travel system to dart between Arkham Island, and most of the riddles just, again, involved you hunting down a specific Easter egg. Another issue comes from climbing and jumping down. This seems like a trivial complaint, but my God, getting down from a ledge was one of the most frustrating things you can experience, especially if you need to be exact to where Batman is supposed to land. Batman is not Spider-Man, and his massive body can often get in the way of basic actions. What still remains a highlight throughout the game is the boss battles. The fights against Scarecrow, Ivy, and Killer Croc are still fantastic. The gameplay surrounding these battles are pretty pale though. With the Scarecrow, you just avoid his gaze. Killer Croc has you tracking down spores and occasionally stunning Croc with your Batarang or using the zip line to get across gaps, and Ivy's battles is just a basic wait for your opponent to make themselves vulnerable and strike. But the atmosphere and tone for each of these encounters still hold up, with Batman battling his inner demons when facing Scarecrow, heading into a death trap when exploring Killer Croc's lair, or facing against a Titan plant monster when going against Ivy. Even Titan Joker being nothing more than a 3-wave hoarding encounter was stellar because of the presentation. And that's why Batman Arkham Asylum still holds up to this day. It leaves a lasting impression as you play through the game. And of course, what leaves the biggest lasting impression is the technical aspects of the game. This includes the graphics, lore, presentation, and voice acting. This is a dark game, and it's not for the sake of being edgy like the recent DC movies. I'm just gonna say this. Justice League. Justice League. The writers ensured that the dark atmosphere of the game was complemented with equally disturbing story of mutation and destruction, with voice actors Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy also providing outstanding performances that play off one another, with Batman in particular constantly being in control even when presented with his failures. The writing does everything in this game justice. Even with minor roles like Clayface mocking Batman are delivered with care. However, I do have one major complaint with the HD remake of this game. For some reason, the subtitles are not aligned. I tried so many ways to try and keep them within the center of the screen, but for some reason they always bleed outside the screen. I don't know why this is happening, and I understand I'm one of those really, and I mean really rare gamers who like to play with subtitles. Heck, I even like to watch movies with subtitles because it kind of offers optional or hidden dialogue that you don't hear unless you have acute hearing. But again, it's my preference, and for some reason the dialogue would always just bleed onto the edges of the screen, and it was very annoying. When you dissect the many elements of this 10-year-old game, it can seem standard. You beat up a bunch of henchmen, perform some basic platforming, and stealth knockout thugs with very little situational awareness. But it's the tone and atmosphere that made me and many other gamers ignore these problems. This was an adventure that was told with a dark and violent tone that Batman stories rarely convey within the video game universe that's usually isolated to the graphic novel and comic book universe. Instead of retelling Bruce's origins or copy-paste generic story, Batman fans got a unique story that explored and established Batman, stopping villains and knocking out thugs. And that's what a lot of fans wanted, and that's what Arkham Asylum delivered. Even 10 years later, this game still holds precedence as one of the best superhero games of all time, and something that's worth playing even to this day. So what did you think of Batman Arkham Asylum? Do you think it still holds up today, or do you think it hasn't aged well? Or maybe you didn't like it at all? Let me know in the comments below. And I will be doing an Arkham City video like this soon. Just wait for it. It does take a lot longer because that game is much longer than Arkham Asylum. I'll also be doing one with Arkham Knight, so be patient. Till next time, everyone, thank you for joining me, and stay awesome.
Going to win! Ready for the next round?
Always.
What?
I'll never let you win. Never.